The lights shouldn't have been on. That's the thought that struck Daniel hardest as he stood in the dark corridor of St. Mary's Hospital, the abandoned building everyone in town avoided. The place had been shut down for nearly 30 years, left to rot with broken windows, graffiti, and hollow silence. Yet above him, a fluorescent bulb flickered on and off, buzzing like a dying insect. And then he saw it. For just a second, between one flicker and the next, there was something standing at the end of the hallway. A figure, thin, motionless, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. Daniel froze. His camera shook in his hand. His friends behind him whispered nervously, asking what he saw. He blinked once, and the figure was gone. But the light kept flickering. Buzz. Dark. Buzz. Empty hall. Buzz. And there it was again. Closer this time. Daniel's throat went dry. "Run," he whispered. And then the bulb popped, leaving them in complete darkness. Cliffhanger intro. 2 hours earlier, it had all felt like fun. Daniel and his friends, Megan, Chris, and Tyler, had been looking for something exciting to do on a boring Friday night. St. Mary's was the obvious choice. Everyone in their town knew the legends. Voices heard through empty halls, the elevator that still worked even though the power was cut, and most famous of all, lights flickering in the children's ward at night. Ghosts, man. That's what it is, Tyler had said as he stuffed a flashlight into his backpack. The spirits of the patients that died there. Chris rolled his eyes. Or it's squatters or broken wiring. Don't get all paranormal investigator on us. Megan didn't say much. She just looked nervous, hugging her jacket close. She hadn't even wanted to come, but Daniel convinced her. He liked exploring abandoned places, filming everything for his YouTube channel. And St. Mary's? That was the jackpot. By the time they reached the hospital, the sun was down and the building loomed against the sky like a giant shadow. The windows were jagged teeth. The paint peeled like dead skin, and the wide front entrance was chained shut. They found another way in through the side, crawling through a broken window into what used to be the reception area. Dust choked the air. Broken chairs lay scattered. On the wall, a faded sign still read, "Welcome to St. Mary's, where care comes first." "Creepy," Megan muttered. "Perfect," Daniel said, raising his camera. They explored the ground floor first. Every step echoed. Their flashlights cut through the dark, landing on broken wheelchairs, overturned gurneys, and walls covered in graffiti. Skulls, names, warnings like "leave" and "don't look up." Chris laughed nervously at that last one. Classic urban explorer scare tactic. But then Tyler froze. Guys, the lights are on." At the far end of the hallway, a single fluorescent bulb was buzzing, glowing weakly in the dark. "That's impossible," Megan whispered. "This place doesn't even have power." Daniel zoomed in with his camera, catching every flicker. His heart pounded. This was better than he'd hoped. Paranormal or not, it was content gold. They decided to follow the light deeper into the hospital. The halls twisted like a maze. At one point, they found an elevator with its doors stuck halfway open. Inside, the buttons still glowed faintly. Megan refused to step closer, insisting she heard breathing from within. Daniel laughed it off, but inside, he felt the same chill. Finally, they reached the children's ward. The paint here was faded with cheerful colors, smiling suns, balloons, cartoon animals. But the drawings were smeared with age and water damage, making them look twisted and monstrous. Tiny beds were still lined up, some with rusted frames, others collapsed in heaps. A child's doll sat slumped in the corner, its glass eye missing. And overhead, another light flickered. Buzz. Dark. Buzz. Buzz. That was when Daniel saw the figure for the first time. At first, he thought it was a trick of the shadows, a shape forming between the beams of his flashlight. But when the bulb flickered again, he realized it was a person. Pale, tall, wearing a hospital gown stained with something dark. He gasped and nearly dropped his camera. Megan grabbed his arm. What do you see?" Daniel blinked. The figure was gone, but the light still buzzed above them. They argued about whether to leave. Tyler wanted to push further. Megan begged to go home. Daniel, caught between fear and excitement, insisted on staying. "Just 5 more minutes," he said. "We're getting something here. I can feel it." So they pressed deeper into the children's ward. The air grew heavier. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and rot. Somewhere down the hall, something metallic clattered to the ground. They froze. Then slowly, the light above them flickered again, revealing the figure now standing closer. This time, they all saw it. Megan screamed. Chris swore loudly. Tyler shouted, "Who's there?" His voice shook more than he wanted to admit. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. It just stared. Then, Piope. The bulb shattered. Glass rained down, and the hallway went black. Megan fumbled with her flashlight. Tyler swore again. Then came the sound. A dragging step. Closer and closer. Chris swung his light down the hall. Empty. But then something whispered right in Daniel's ear. "You shouldn't be here." He spun around, shining his light wildly. Nothing. Megan was sobbing now. "We need to leave. Now." Tyler, pale-faced, nodded. "Yeah, screw this." But as they turned, every light in the hallway blinked on at once. One by one. Buzz. 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 The entire children's ward glowed sickly yellow. And in every single doorway along the hall, a figure was standing. Dozens of them, all in gowns, all staring straight at them. Daniel dropped his camera. And that's when the hallway lights began to flicker in unison. On and off, making the figures step closer each time. Buzz. Dark. Buzz. They're closer. Buzz. Closer still. Until the lights went out completely. And all they heard was the sound of children laughing. The laughter didn't sound like children anymore. It was warped, stretched, echoing unnaturally through the dark halls. It rose and fell, like it was coming from every direction at once. Megan clutched Daniel's arm, so tightly her nails dug into his skin. Tyler swore under his breath, flashlight shaking in his grip. Chris just stood frozen, staring into the dark where the figures had been. And then the laughter stopped. Dead silence. For a few long seconds, all they could hear was their own breathing and the occasional drip of water somewhere in the distance. Daniel finally fumbled for his dropped camera, his fingers trembling as he scooped it up. He switched it on. The tiny red light glowed. We need to get out," Megan whispered. Her voice cracked, and she kept glancing over her shoulder. "Agreed," Tyler said quickly. "This is too much. Let's just go. Now." But Chris shook his head. "Wait, if this place really is haunted, we just saw proof, man. Do you know what that means? We can't just leave without." Before he could finish, every light in the hallway flashed back on with a blinding glare. The figures were gone. The doors stood empty. But the laughter returned, this time softer, almost like it was coming from just one room down the hall. Daniel's mouth went dry. The door to room 307 stood half open, light flickering inside. "No," Megan said firmly, stepping back. "We're not going in there." "I'm serious, Daniel." But Daniel couldn't look away. Something about that half-open door pulled at him, like gravity. He raised his camera again, swallowing hard. "If there's something in there, we need to see it." Chris nodded, though his face was pale. Tyler muttered a curse under his breath, but followed anyway. Megan stayed behind for a moment, torn between leaving them and not wanting to be alone. Finally, with a choked sob, she hurried after them. The closer they got to room 307, the stronger the flickering grew. The bulb inside buzzed louder and louder, as though struggling to stay alive. Daniel pushed the door open with his foot, the rusty hinges groaning. Inside, the room looked like a typical hospital ward. Beds along the walls, a single table in the center. Dust blanketed everything, but there was something odd about the beds. They were perfectly made, the blankets tucked neatly. Too neatly. Then Daniel's camera caught something. On one of the pillows lay a fresh indent, as though someone had just been lying there. "Holy," Chris started, but before he could finish, the light overhead sputtered violently. It went dark for half a second, then flashed back on, revealing a figure sitting upright in the bed. It was a little girl. Her skin was pale gray, her eyes sunken but wide open, staring at them. She wore a faded hospital gown, and her lips moved slowly. "Stay." The light blinked off. When it blinked back on, the bed was empty. Daniel's heart hammered. He could hear Megan sobbing softly behind him, whispering, "No, no, no, no," over and over. Then the laughter came again, but this time it was deafening. It filled the room, rattling the windows. The beds trembled, metal legs screeching against the floor. Tyler dropped his flashlight, which rolled under one of the beds. "Forget this, I'm done," he shouted, bolting for the door. But as he reached it, the door slammed shut with such force the glass cracked in the window panel. He yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped. The flickering light above them buzzed, faster and faster, until it felt like a strobe. Each flash revealed something different. The beds were closer together. Flash. Shadows crawled across the walls. Flash. Figures stood around the room, surrounding them. Flash. The little girl was right in front of Daniel, her hollow eyes staring into his. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping his camera again. The girl tilted her head and whispered in a voice that seemed to echo inside his skull. "You shouldn't have come here." The lights went out completely. This time they stayed out. The darkness was so heavy it felt like a weight pressing against their skin. Chris fumbled with his phone, trying to turn on the flashlight, but the screen cracked to static. Megan clung to Daniel, her whole body shaking. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Circling the room. Daniel tried to stay calm, raising his camera blindly, though it couldn't capture anything in the pitch black. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, just inches from his ear, came the same warped whisper he'd heard before. "We never left." Daniel screamed, stumbling backward into one of the beds. Megan shrieked as something icy brushed against her arm. Chris cursed and kicked out in the dark, but hit nothing. Tyler pounded on the door, his fists slamming against the wood until they bled. And then, all at once, the lights came back. But this time, they weren't hospital lights. The room was bathed in a sickly green glow, like old emergency lights. The walls no longer looked abandoned. They were clean, white, sterile. The beds were occupied, each one holding a patient hooked up to machines. The patients were pale, their chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Except they weren't breathing. Their eyes were wide open, every single one of them staring at Daniel and his friends. Megan collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically. Tyler shouted again and again, "Wake up! Wake up!" as though this was some kind of nightmare. Daniel raised his camera with trembling hands, filming everything. He didn't know why. Maybe because he needed proof, or maybe because he needed something to focus on other than the terror clawing at his chest. That was when one of the patients sat up. The sound of bones cracking filled the room as the figure rose, its neck twisting at an unnatural angle. It opened its mouth wide, impossibly wide, and let out a screech so loud the lights flickered violently again. All around the room, the other patients began to rise, one by one, their movements jerky and broken. Machines sparked. Monitors beeped wildly. And over it all, the laughter returned, louder than ever. The door burst open on its own, slamming against the wall. Tyler didn't wait. He bolted out into the hallway, the others right behind him. They sprinted through the twisting corridors, the flickering lights following them like a wave. Behind them, the sound of dozens of dragging footsteps echoed closer and closer. Daniel gasped for breath, clutching his camera to his chest. "Stairs, we need stairs," he shouted. They found a stairwell, the door hanging half-broken on its hinges. They stumbled down the steps, flashlights swinging wildly. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air thicker and colder the deeper they went. But when they reached the bottom, their stomachs dropped. There was no exit. The stairwell ended in a bricked-up wall, as though the escape had been sealed years ago. "No, this can't be," Chris whispered, slamming his fists against the wall. The laughter echoed again, bouncing off the walls surrounding them. Then the lights overhead began flickering again, slower this time, taunting. Buzz. Shadows moving above them. Buzz. Figures standing on the steps. Buzz. Closer. Daniel's grip tightened on his camera as his friends pressed against the wall, eyes wide with horror. The last bulb buzzed once, then went dark. And in that choking blackness, a chorus of whispers rose, all speaking at once, overlapping into madness. Stay with us. You're ours now." Daniel's scream echoed through the stairwell as icy hands grabbed his arms from the dark.